I would like to welcome you to San Jose and San Jose State. I've been around the world, and literally, this is the best place on earth. You could not have picked a better location. The weather has been mentioned several times. It is really a great city to live in. If any of you have lived in San Francisco, you can't even park your car in front of your house. The culture in San Francisco is dominated by the tourists. We accommodate tourists, but it is our culture here, and it's really a unique culture. It's a great place to live in. There is food and culture from all around the world, very readily available. There's really very easy access to the rest of the country and the world. I always fly in and out of San Jose Airport. Very easy reach. Probably what makes this unique is that it is technologically the most exciting place to be in. The number of conversations that you hear is really fascinating, and you are not restricted to your own quote-unquote area of expertise. People are always open and willing to listen to you, expound crazy ideas, but the fact that you're an outsider gives you a fresh perspective and absolves you from the dangers of inbreeding. The moment you become inbred in your field, you have lost originality and creativity. You are locked into your way of thinking, and this is probably what inhibits progress more than anything else. And that's why we are a center of innovation and creativity. I've been involved in the biomedical engineering field, and I see a lot of other technologies being incorporated as they're being developed by people who are biologists. Okay. So it's really fascinating. So again, you could not have chosen a better place, a better location, a better university, and potential for and the return on your investment is going to be outstanding if you do things right. So a little bit about myself. Not too far from the Philippines. I was born and grew up in Malaysia. K through 13. I actually went to Japan for my university and also worked there, so I ended up spending 8 years. I didn't know the language. I didn't know anybody. No clue of the culture. But I wanted to get away from mother. And, and that was good enough reason and the first time you're in a different culture, it can be very challenging and sometimes perhaps even traumatic, but it's one of the best things I did. It gave me the sense that I can go into places I'm not familiar with and survive. And I've also been able to do that in terms of disciplines, walk off into different disciplines and be able to survive. So after that, I went back to Malaysia. I worked there for a couple of years. Then came to the US, went to graduate school, worked here, went to Germany. Again, I knew nobody. I didn't know the language. I took a pay cut, but had an exciting opportunity. And spent 3 years there, learned the language, and then came back to the US, and it's been work, and work. I think all of you are looking at, I saw the show of hands, you want to graduate and go work. Keep in mind, as graduates, with a graduate degree, you are going to be salaried. 60 to 70 hours a week is expected, and you're not going to get overtime pay. Okay. Disclaimers, I think some of the slides are geared specifically towards the international students. So those of you who are domestic can just ignore it because it may not, I may be preaching, telling you stuff that you already know well. And the second disclaimer, I didn't put it up there to begin with because all these slides have been reviewed by Dr. Brooke. If there are any mistakes or inconsistencies, it's his responsibility, not mine. Which is why I didn't put it in there, because as he was reviewing it, he might have taken it off. So these are your skills for survival, right? Okay, so as graduate students, I want to talk a little bit about what makes you a graduate student and what it means to be a graduate student. You are no longer in high school for sure. You are no longer in college, i.e. in a BS program, we expect independence and an independent pursuit of knowledge. Over and over again, I come across students who are just interested in another piece of paper to demand a higher salary or make themselves more employable. That should really be secondary at best, because if all you're doing is looking for a piece of paper to justify applying for a job or a higher salary level, you have really lost it. In the university environment, we definitely emphasize lifelong learning, and this is where you learn how to be a lifelong learner. Because if you are a lifelong learner, you will be able to adapt to the changes that are inevitable. The world 20 years ago, the world 40 years ago, and I happen to know the world 60 years ago, were very different places compared to what it is now. In another 10 to 20 years, it's going to be even more different, and the rate of change is accelerating. And it's natural that the rate of change accelerates. So it is your own thirst of knowledge that should be driving you, not just pursuit of a piece of paper. We expect you to be able to deal with complex, open-ended issues. I think especially a lot of engineers expect that we will give them problems that will have closed-form solutions, and you come out with an answer of 73.5. That is not the case in the real world, even in engineering. There are always what we call trade-off issues. Just about any problem, any real-life problem, is going to be open-ended, and you make decisions, you make judgments, and sometimes those judgments are subjective. Not everything in engineering is quote-unquote objective. It is not a number-crunching field. It is a field that demands creativity, demands integration, and demands original thought. Critical thinking. So just about every class I teach, there are term papers to write. And keep in mind, the moment you write or present something, it should be your responsibility to verify that that is accurate. To cite a source and say, I don't know, that's what was written in that paper, is really not acceptable. Put yourself in a classroom, the professor says something, and you ask the professor, why is that so? And if that professor were to say, I don't know, that's what the textbook says, that should not be acceptable to you, right? And if it is acceptable to you, you should not be in graduate school. But you should have that same standard. And this is where critical thinking comes. You ought to be able to review whatever material in your field or other fields and say, does this make sense? Is it reasonable? And be able to question it and go through that process before incorporating that small body of knowledge into what you are developing, writing, presenting. So you've got to be able to discern the quality and reliability of information. Just because something comes from a peer-reviewed paper does not necessarily make it right. I have one paper I use in one of my graduate classes that actually has 77 errors. I'm not joking, and about half of them are actually subject matter errors, not grammatical errors. And this is a peer-reviewed publication. So just because it's written does not make it the truth, whatever truth is. Okay? And truth is subjective too, by the way. At least I think so. There is no absolute truth. Right? And Dr. Wiley and Dr. Brooke have agreed. I see them shaking their head. So if you don't like that statement, take it up with them. It's good to have people to blame, right? You have to take ownership and responsibility for your work products. And these two comments really go hand in hand. It's only when you are doing, you're thinking critically about what you're reviewing, what you're writing, what experiments you're doing, that you'll be able to take ownership and responsibility. And again, you don't shove it off on somebody and say, I don't know. That's what Dr. Jones said. And then communication skills. And it is really important to be able to communicate what you're working on, what your ideas are in English. And by English, I don't necessarily mean just English, but I do. But what I'm emphasizing is avoid jargon. If you are talking in jargon, you're talking to yourself. And a lot of times the jargon is ill-defined as well. You ought to be able to communicate your ideas, what you have developed, to people who are not in your field and have them understand you. And if you can achieve that, then you're able to communicate, but at the same time, you've got to communicate with integrity. You're not used car salespeople, and I hope you never will be one. You're not just trying to sell something, because if that integrity is not part of what you're communicating, then it's going to come back and